Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you coming out today and joining us in Port Richmond, Staten Island. I'm here joined by elected officials, representatives from elected officials, and community representatives, residents that are very concerned with homeless shelter after homeless shelter after homeless shelter sprouting up in our district and across the city of New York at lucrative amounts of money to the taxpayers. We're asking a simple question today. Is this about compassion or is there corruption? And we've been identifying and reading through multiple contracts that the city has entered with different operators of homeless shelters across the city. And one thing's clear, the city's right to shelter law, sanctuary policy, as well as their quest and goal of emptying Rikers Island has led to homeless populations skyrocketing across our city since Bill de Blasio was mayor. Now, obviously this is bringing quality of life concerns. People do not know who is being placed in these shelters. The city has not been transparent. They even haven't notified elected officials. So for example, this particular shelter, my office was not notified, and other elected officials claim the same. And that is against a state policy and local laws that they're supposed to not only notify elected officials, but engage the community, engage and go through the process of the community board and local civic associations. We know, because I did a FOIL request last year, that it came to particular shelters in our city, there were 16,000 crimes committed where the perpetrator traced back to one of these shelters. So we don't know what's going to happen here. Are there going to be convicted criminals? Are there going to be sex offenders? Because we know in other shelters there are convicted criminals, there are sex offenders, and there are mentally ill individuals. But in addition to the quality of life and public safety concerns, why we're really here today is because we've noticed something consistent across the board when it comes to contracts, particularly the ones in our district. What we're finding is that what the city is using your tax dollars to pay for are these lucrative contracts with shady operators. When we did the math, it turns out that the shelter contract for this particular site comes down to $9,100 per month per unit. Think about that. The average rent on Staten Island is $1,698. The average mortgage payment on Staten Island is $3,800. So what the city is doing is using your tax dollars to enter into shady contracts with operators that have questionable histories, and they're paying these insane amounts. $9,300 per unit per month. That is about 5.5 times the average rent in our borough. And it is 2.5 times the monthly mortgage payment in our borough. Now you look at the $9,300 a month is Island Shores, by the way. This particular one is $9,103 per unit. So roughly the same. The bottom line is it is a substantial amount of money. You literally could pay a mortgage off and place a family in there instead of having them live in a small unit here. So what's also eye-popping is how they're skirting or at least completely violating environmental and zoning laws. So for example, in Midland Beach, where we have the Island Shores property, that is a J2 occupancy classification, and it allows for only permanent residences. It's very clear. And what they're doing, they kicked out those permanent residents actually a couple of years ago to turn it into a migrant shelter, and now they're entering into another shelter contract with Homes for the Homeless. Remember, that was the facility where they kicked out seniors, including our veterans, including a World War II veteran and other veterans, to turn it into a migrant shelter at an exorbitant amount. And I should also mention that most of these contracts are no bid. It's not a competitive bid process as required by city law. They're claiming that it's an emergency, and so they can skirt that type of law and, you know, these environmentalists. So it's really, really egregious what the city is doing. So not only are they violating that J2 zoning over in Island Shores, but there's two other facilities. One in Richmond Valley, where they've purchased lands, and then one in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, also both part of my district. These are either special flood hazard or freshwater wetlands areas. Why is the city violating its own laws or state laws to be able to put up these shelters and fleece the taxpayers and place individuals in there, by the way, who are not even from Staten Island? So, in the letter to the Department of Justice, which you'll all receive, it's about a 6-page letter, you'll see all these details, but you'll also see some of the shady pasts of these operators, particularly those who are opening up the, or want to open up the facility in Richmond Valley and the one in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. And I lay it out all there for you to see. But what I also want to say is that the reason why we're calling on the Department of Justice to investigate these contracts, $9,103. As I said, 5.5 times what this community pays for a monthly rent or a monthly mortgage payment. They are fleecing the taxpayers. This has become a business. Somebody's getting rich. We believe it's the people that are connected to elected officials, and we want the city to investigate. Now, the reason why we're asking for the DOJ to do this, because there is precedent. On March 31st, we saw the Department of Justice unveil a criminal federal indictment of 4 individuals connected to a shelter in Brooklyn. And it was a pay-to-play scheme where these individuals who operated the shelter stole $1.3 million, allegedly. Of course, these are charges right now. $1.3 million, and allegedly accepted kickbacks for subcontractors working at that shelter. That shelter operator garnered $200 million in contracts over the last few years, and they still have a contract with the city as of today for $94 million that is supposed to go for a shelter that will begin in July. So we need the Department of Justice, because the city's not doing the right thing here in terms of scrutiny, and the Department of Investigations, and I'm sure my colleagues on the city level want that as well, for the Department of Investigations at the city level to investigate this further, because they were the ones who initially exposed these lucrative contracts and the nepotism behind them. But we want the Department of Justice of the United States of America to investigate and scrutinize these contracts in my district as well, because we think the indictment that was unveiled last month is just the tip of the iceberg. And that is what we're here to call for, and we urge the Department of Justice to please review the findings that I put in the letter to them and conduct their own investigation so we can get to the bottom of this. With that, I want to introduce our council member who is here from the city level, Councilman Frank Morano.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you for your leadership on this. As usual, you've set the standard among elected officials, not only for being forward-thinking and independent, but for being the hardest-working elected official that we have. What we have now in terms of managing homelessness in this city is really the worst of all possible scenarios. It's the worst of all possible scenarios for the taxpayer, for the community, and for the homeless. You basically have a situation where we are taking communities that don't have homeless people there, and we are exporting homeless people there. We are taking public money and giving it to private hands, not well-deserving, very needy people who could use a few extra bucks. No, millionaires. Millionaires who buy property and in exchange for being able to skirt local zoning restrictions that every other private business would have to adhere to, they are able to get these lucrative shelter contracts and make tens of millions of dollars. And in many cases, we've seen that all it takes is multiple campaign contributions to multiple political figures. Well, something is rotten in Denmark because the people that they then choose to run these homeless shelter facilities are not the best possible people who are going to provide the best care and make sure that their facilities are the best neighbors for the community. No. They're choosing the operators that will do it as cheaply as possible so that they, the owner of this facility, can make the most money. All of this is being done in the name of helping people. If we wanted to help people that needed help, we would fix up the public housing situation in New York City. Unfortunately, NYCHA is the worst landlord in New York City. If we wanted to help people that needed help, we'd help them stay in their communities. Instead, we are seeing the worst possible process. But what the Congresswoman has pointed out here is something potentially far more insidious and far more sinister, which is a complete lack of transparency in how these contracts are awarded, in what these folks have had to do to get these homeless shelter contracts. And if that doesn't cry out for scrutiny on the federal level, I don't know what does. And it shouldn't take a federal criminal indictment to wake people up and say, we're concerned about how our taxpayers are being spent and why these shady developers are able to make millions while showing nothing to the public about the process or any other aspect of this homeless shelter situation. So I applaud the Congresswoman, and we're happy to join her in asking for the Department of Justice to scrutinize this. And I'll just add that, as the Congresswoman said, helping people and demanding transparency aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, they go hand in hand. If the system isn't transparent, if the contracts aren't properly vetted, if the locations don't make sense, then we're not setting anyone up for success. Not the residents, not the communities, and not the folks that would be in these shelters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. I now want to introduce our local state assemblyman, Sam Pirozzolo.
Hello, everyone. How are you today? Listen, I would like to thank you, Congresswoman, for doing this. Steve, thank you for joining us from Brooklyn. Senator Chan. Oh, my colleague here, Lester, thank you very much for coming, and everybody who's here. So it's been said before, and I just want to make it a little bit more clear. The city, instead of trying to reduce homelessness, seems to be in the business of homelessness. Instead of reducing the amount of homelessness or the amount of homeless people we have, they like to warehouse these people and keep their homelessness in a perpetual cycle of making money. And not only is it a problem here with what the Congresswoman said about $9,000 a month for a unit, the other part of the homeless shelter system is a big problem also. Just recently at my office, we had a young lady who's paying $1,400 a month. And as the Congresswoman quoted, about $1,700 a month is about the average rent. But instead of the landlord saying to her, okay, you can pay me $1,700 a month rent or give me an increase, the landlord is telling her that she has to move because he can get a voucher through the homeless shelter system for $2,400. So what the mayoral administration is doing here is they are raising the base rent for everybody, not only on Staten Island, not only in Brooklyn, but for everywhere in New York City, because it's a business to them. They don't really seem to care. So, Congresswoman, I would ask that when the Department of Justice comes in, another thing that they really need to investigate is how many more homeless people do we have day after day, week after week, year after year? Has there been a reduction in homelessness with the millions and billions of dollars we've spent? The answer, from what we can see here, is probably no. We're in the business of warehousing and keeping people homeless. And not only that, when you leave the shelter system, We're raising the rents all across New York City because the shelter system pays more than what the average rent is right now. And that's a problem, and it needs to stop. Anything that I could do to help an investigation along, I mean, I could make this constituent available to speak to anyone. It is criminal what's going on. There's no doubt about it. We're seeing types of frauds like this all across the country. Now is time to put the spotlight on City Hall. So thank you very much for what you do. Thank you, everyone.
We have two elected officials who share a representation with me in Brooklyn, part of my district, and we've been fighting, as I mentioned before, a shelter in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and that one, again, is not supposed to be in terms of environmental. They're skirting environmental laws, trying to build in a flood area. And so I'd like to first bring up our State Assemblyman, Lester Chang from Brooklyn.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman, and thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sam, my colleagues, and thank you, Frank. Thank you for very much here. It's not only Bensonhurst, but throughout the city. I'm fighting right now at Borough Park, right across the street from Malliotakis Hospital, that have permanent rent-stabilized apartment commingling, mixing in with homeless people. Now, how would you feel about that? No one would like to feel about that. You got these transient people are coming in. This is not a community. And besides, there's public safety involved. So I think we still think of Denmark is not great around here. So we need a federal prosecutor, federal justice to do this. Not the state, not the city. I don't trust them at all. We need federal. And thank you, Congresswoman, to get these people involved to look at the contract, because it's an ongoing fight. Now, last night, I just heard from the radio, East Village, they're able to stop a homeless shelter, and that particular area voted overwhelmingly to Mayor Mandani. I'm not sure what other signal to the mayor, my former colleague since last year, saying that nobody wants homeless shelter. It's a waste of money. And we're pouring $17 billion to have neighborhood jailhouse, which is a waste of money. They could carve part of that money to improve Rikers Island, and the rest of it, $16 billion to build affordable housing. That's the smarter way to do, and also to plug into city budget deficit as well. And thank you very much for having me here. Thank you, Congresswoman, and your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're moving up to the State Senate, and we have our other friend from Brooklyn who's in the fight with us, and that is Senator Steve Chan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nicole, and I want to thank Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis for all the research and the work that she has done to this point. And I myself and my office has also done some research, and I actually came up with numbers bigger than that. I won't go into the details here right now, but everybody heard of the book, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, right? You know what? I could rewrite that book. It's called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and the fruit is money, and everybody inside of a circle is picking money off that tree. With that said, we absolutely need intervention, investigation, and inquiry from the United States Department of Justice. It's because, from what I've seen, it seems like certain group gets paid a tremendous amount of money to service the homeless. So is homelessness actually homelessness? And Sam, I want to thank you for mentioning that. Homelessness is not about homelessness in the city of New York. It's about a big business. It's like Microsoft. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. That's what it has turned into. And everybody on the inside of a certain circle, is making money from this business. I questioned Mayor Adams in 2025 in the public hearings, in the budget hearings in Albany, and I said to him, why are you spending all this money in the homelessness business when you can actually have them show up at a desk every day, give them $200 and let them take care of themselves? And that would come out to about $6,000 a month, a little less than that. I told the mayor that it doesn't cost me this kind of money to raise my family and pay my mortgage and commute to Albany. So there's clearly something going on here. Corruption? Yeah, I'm sure there is, right? So I said inside of the circle. Who's inside of that circle? Private developers, local politicians, elected officials, special interest groups. And as we see, and I think in the latest indictments, the spouses of certain elected officials. So everybody's in this game here. I can tell you that we're not standing here, right? I brought with me some neighbors from two neighborhoods here, Bensonhurst and Sheepshead Bay, and nobody's fighting for them harder than us here, Assemblyman Chang, Nicole, and myself, Sam, and Frank over here.
Right here.
Oh, over there. All right. So I want to thank my neighbors for showing up. The reason why they're here, if you look at these signs, right? Who in their right minds would want to import these homeless people to our neighborhood 50 feet, not even 50 feet, about 20 feet from a subway station? And I've mentioned that before. Bad location. Even if the concept is right, even if the idea is right, even if the goal is correct, bad location. Why do you want to jeopardize our grandmas, our grandpas, our commuters, our hardworking people, our kids going to and from? So I'm not against homeless shelters. I am against homeless shelters done with corruption, done with exuberance, not in the right way, done without bidding. Now, recently, my office has discovered some discrepancies in the way that the permits have been issued for 2501 86th Street and 2134 Coyle Street out in Sheepshead Bay. We wrote Board of Standards and Appeals challenges, and it is being entertained. It is going to be heard. Building permits were issued in the case of 86th Street prior to the signing of an agreement between the city and the developer for a homeless shelter. And we found articles that the Department of Buildings was not supposed to issue those permits. So I personally visited the Department of Buildings, and we sat down for a couple of hours, and they said, well, sometimes we can overlook that. I said, really? Okay, so we looked into it further, and as it turns out, they can't. So we are challenging those issues. Right now, there's a stop work order on 86th Street because the developer, with disregard to the safety of our neighbors and constituents over there, started work, and DEP came and took a look, and there was asbestos. So now they're investigating the previous asbestos inspector. So that itself is an atrocity. So an inspector, a private inspector, a number of months ago, maybe 18 months or so ago, investigated for asbestos at that location. And he wrote a report that says there's no asbestos. So the Department of Buildings issued the work permit. With that said, DEP came to look at it last month and says, wait a minute, there is asbestos, and you're taking it apart, and you're shooting it all over the place. We're going to stop your work. So now, wait a minute, they revoked that asbestos report that was done privately a year ago. So shouldn't that have automatically revoked the building permit? But the Department of Buildings did not revoke that permit, even if it was on a fictitious and felonious asbestos report. So these are some of the things that we see that are going on, and I'm very happy to be standing here today. Oh, by the way, I'm getting sued.
We all can sue. Yeah.
Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis is getting sued. Assemblyman Lester Chang is getting sued. Here we have a greedy private developer whose brother-in-law, I believe, I believe did 10 years for manslaughter. Remember when Nicole said shady character, questionable character? Right? So anyway, they're suing us. They want us to shut up. And how ridiculous is that? People, our constituents, our neighbors, our friends, elected us to represent them. And they want us to shut up. No, Mr. Sandhu, I am not shutting up. You got that? I am not shutting up.
I've run out of time here.
I have run out of time. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve. All right, I want to acknowledge some of the other elected officials who have representatives here. We thank them for sending representatives. We have Senator Lanza's office, Assemblyman Michael Tanusas and Michael Riley, Councilman David Carr, Assemblyman Charles Fall. So this is a bipartisan opposition that we're stating here today. I want to also our last speaker, who is the leader of this community, our Port Richmond North Shore Alliance president. But before I bring him up, I do want to say that we also have representatives from the Midland Beach Civic Association, Sal Monforti Anthony Antico is a great community advocate. Lena Chen, who's also a great community advocate. Want to acknowledge them for joining us in this effort. And I just want to final words here are going to be from Port Richmond North Shore Alliance, Mario Bonviaggio.
I want to sincerely thank United States Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis for arranging this, and the other elected officials that came over the bridge to great downtown Port Richmond, Staten Island. As you can see, this is not one selective community. Now this is spreading out throughout Staten Island. This is no longer north versus south, east versus west, Brooklyn, said it not in our backyard. It's affecting everyone, and particularly, I'm just going to stick to the facts on what's going on Staten Island, particularly on the North Shore. As confusing as it is, we came up with three numbers. It started at 47, it started at 40, it started at $35.5 million. You scratch your head on it, it's like, why can't we have a steady number? So we worked with the numbers on the original number that we have. We are 7 to 9 weeks behind because we were not notified of what was going on at 109 Port Richmond Avenue. We had a community meeting like we do every month. That was unfortunately our first one for 2026. We had a city elected official, like every elected official, comes out and updates us on what's going on. We had a table of women sitting at our packed meetings. We range from 70 to 100 people at our meetings. And they asked valid questions. At the end, we asked any concerns, comments. The main question was, Mario, what's going on at 109 Port Richmond Avenue? So our group is an unpaid, 100% volunteer civic organization. We're civilians. We represent the community, 10302, and other areas if need be. We only could get what the information we receive. I was being forthcoming, as everyone should be, and transparent, saying, well, there's really no movement. We have our key players that live in the area that eye the building. We've seen no trucks. We've seen no personnel. We've seen nothing going on. A representative from the council member's office of the 49th District, which represents this community, jumped up and took over the talk. I stepped aside and he said, well, there's a celebration happening in the next few weeks at that location. Everyone's like, what celebration? At 109 Port Richmond Avenue. With who? Project Hospitality. For what? They're opening up the building. There's going to be a homeless shelter with. And miraculously, I said nothing. The people in the room spoke very strongly about it. So you can't suppress this information. It's on our website at portrichmondstrong.com. The people in the crowd were asking questions. So when the representative felt that it wasn't to his benefit, he kind of shut down, could not give us the basic answer on who did you call on, who did you speak with. When you start a conversation like everyone here, hi, who is this? You get a name. He couldn't provide that information numerous times. And this is where the frustration is. Now, because of us, we're getting the push that no one's trusting our elected officials at all levels, from local up to federal. To be clear, we could only get the information what we get from our electeds. The elected officials only get information on what the city's administration offers. If there's no transparency, the elected officials don't know anything. But if an elected official knows just an increment of what's going on, their responsibility is to notify the civic organization that represents the very community that we are watching out for reckless propositions such as this. It was the fault of the council member for not notifying us 6 to 8 weeks ago, which is now 7 to 9 weeks ago. So we're not saying we're against it. We all know homeless shelters do not work anywhere. We're supporting our Midland Beach community, our South Shore community, now Bensonhurst community, any community that does, even the East Village, where the elected official says overwhelmingly voted for the new administration to come in. His thank you is for putting in a homeless shelter. It does not work. We're not saying we're opposing. These people should be housed in a humanized manner, not in a 150 to 180 square foot room with no essentials. Averaging with the three numbers, this is averaging on the number we started with at 47 million, one individual is $15,000 a month. This number is a few thousand less, but this is now 2 of the 3 figures that came out on city platforms with no essential services. You need money for laundry, you need money for transportation, you need money for food. Let's upbeat that bill to another 8,000. So now we're at, what is that? I don't even know. $17,000. No, more. Actually, 15 plus 6,000 is $21,000 per individual. So there's money in the coffers, where our money, let me correct myself, that is in city and state and federal funding. We don't just complain about it. This civic group, why we're so successful, we come with a resolution. We come with action. We have a board member that's also a developer that has paused 18 available apartments to be housed in a humanized way, which accepts vouchers and market rate. It's been held off for an average of 17 months because the same administration that wants homeless shelters has not signed off on approvals or permits to continue on with his project. Privately funded, right on Port Richmond Avenue, right behind us, right behind you, and right behind me on the corner. Apartments that could be available as long as they expedite these permits. The city administration is sleeping on these documents. Furthermore, they also have the city FEPS, Fighting Homeless and Eviction Program. That is a voucher program. There's a National Section 8 program. This money, at a fraction of a cost, the number that we worked with, came out to $15,000 with no essential. This developer, in a matter of, say, 72 hours, as he stated, and we have a representative here that's ready to take these applications, could house 50% within 24 hours or whoever comes in this building. All of them within a month. Over 100 within 60 days. All he needs is the funding. Now we come with statistical facts. They're running out of money in the voucher program. This money, which we would support, to be redirected to these housing programs, instead of giving it to the most disorganized, dysfunctional, unhonest organizations such as Project Hospitality. All the eggs in one basket. And we all know they have not been forthcoming. They're inaccurate with what they presented to the community, and outright lies. Port Richmond can say we are the recipients of their failures to the community. 3 blocks down, 1544 Castleton Avenue, which is operated by Project Hospitality, is the most dangerous address in 10302. Less than 5 years old. We have the criminally insane walking up, stealing from stores. We had an event here before this press, which was formerly a resident from that building, was kicked out. What they do, they kick them out, and now they're stragglers of Port Richmond Avenue in the community in Port Richmond. They are by far the worst organization that Staten Island has to witness. So to get back to the numbers of the city FEPS, this is a third of the cost for one individual. We don't know if there's going to be one individual or family. It's even worse if it's a family in a 150 square foot room with no services. So for one person, it would be $2,750 under the city voucher or $39.50 under the National Section 8. With the family, you approximately raise that to more than $1,000. That's still a third less than the number we figured at $15,000, and possibly 50% than the number that's coming here. But this is humanized housing. They're in an apartment. They have a bathroom. They have a kitchen. They can live in a dignified way. How they live is how they live. Let's put the children in perspective. There's the McKinney-Vento law that's been established in 2015 in regards to transporting out homeless children to one school, and only when seats are available. From what we speak to in our neighboring schools, and we get the news from, vice principals or the parent coordinators, we transport these kids sometimes from Staten Island to Starrett City, from Brooklyn to the Bronx, from Manhattan to Queens, from Staten Island to Springfield Gardens. Do you think they're going to excel in school, a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old child? I could answer that for you. No. There's going to be a big absentee rate, and the level of success is going to be less than 0.7%. These are statistical facts, not theoretical figures that we're putting out there. So there's a lot of wheels turning with this. If this happens, you're not only hurting, like, it's an insult to us for not knowing, but the hardworking, growing Spanish community we have in downtown Port Richmond. This is our signature block right behind us on Port Richmond Avenue from Bennett to Vreeland, all immigrant-owned stores, flourishing little businesses. This building will not give economic relief to any of these stores. Why? Because they're homeless. They don't have money, correct? So where is the money going to come? What they're possible, because again, we don't know who's here. Project Hospitality will not be forthcoming who's coming. They're saying, oh, families of domestic violence. We don't know that. No one knows that. They haven't been forthcoming or honest with the community for 30 years. And everyone knows it. Everyone tells me, now I'm the dog barking on the porch, screaming that they are not a nice, community-oriented organization. So going back to this strong, this couple of people here that own businesses on Port Richmond, they will not benefit from this. They would not excel. Now, this week, we worked for months to get a Brazilian steakhouse at a building that's being constructed right now. Because of this news, they pulled out. So it's already an economical impact, and we didn't even start yet. And let's not forget the rents over here. They're not $1,500. They start at like $6,500 to $9,000 a month, these stripper stores right here. How do you think people are going to want to come when they know that there's a home of unknown individuals in this room? How is it going to impact? We're going to have more shuttered storefronts here? Is that what they want? They're killing. The 9 years that we've work that we've done in Port Richmond will go down with one flush because of this project. I want to thank, again, Congresswoman Malliotakis for putting this on the front burner. On the federal level, I also want to commend the Borough President, Vito Fossella. He's been on point. He put this on a front burner last year. We called this would happen, but we couldn't get the information from the city because they are not forthcoming. So he's going to deal with it at city level. The Congresswoman is going to deal with it at the federal level. The complaints that are coming in regarding to the electeds, not my own personal thing, but what comes in the email, the city and state level government, they're fighting for first place on doing a disservice to the community. We don't know what's going on in Albany. We don't know what's going on in New York City Council chamber. What we read in the headlines and what we see on TV, it's nothing is good. It's, we need them to do more to, like, put their running shoes on, take off the high heels, take off the shoes, and put your sneakers on and get into this game. Because we're not only seeing it, but you, the community, are witnessing what is not happening. And I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming. Any questions from the audience?